It's a great pleasure to introduce to the stage Dr. James Hansen. All right, well, this is weird. Normally you get a chance to sort of meet and have a chat with people that you interview. This is the first time I've ever met James, and here we are in front of a room full of people dying to know what he has to say. So, James, where did it begin? You were looking out at the stars. We'll do a little bit of a background, and then we'll move on to the things that people want to hear. And we've got a name today, I think, of because people can go on and they can have a look at all the things you have to say about climate. But I think a lot of people are here today because they feel a little bit impotent and they want to know what to do. So we're going to move into that later on. But just to begin with, you started off at NASA.
Well, yeah, I started out. Is this working? Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I started out growing up in Iowa, a farm state in the middle of the United States. And I was very lucky because I was able to go to the state university, and there the head of the physics department was a man by the name of James Van Allen. He's the man who discovered the radiation belts that go around the Earth when the first satellite was launched in 1959. And he noticed me, even though I was a very shy student. He noticed because I did well on some examinations, and he suggested that there was data from the planet Venus, which was very interesting because it was very strong radiation in the microwave region. And it implied either this planet is very hot or else it's got an ionosphere that's radiating. Anyway, he suggested I write my thesis on that. I got very interested in the planet Venus. And I was able to get a postdoctoral position at NASA and went off to New York City to study the planet Venus. And I proposed an experiment which was chosen by NASA and launched to go to the planet Venus to study the clouds of Venus. Because if you look at Venus in a telescope, it looks like a tennis ball. It's very fuzzy. It's just yellow, and you can't see the surface. So I thought that was very interesting to study those clouds on Venus. But then a postdoc asked me some questions about the Earth's atmosphere and asked me to help him do calculations. So we did some calculations. We realized that not only CO2 is increasing, but methane and nitrous oxide. And we realized humans are changing our atmosphere. And that is going to change our climate. So I started to work on a model to try to, and I resigned. By that time, our experiment had been launched. And it was on the way to Venus. But I decided the Earth was more interesting than Venus, so I resigned as the principal investigator, and a friend of mine took over that experiment. And ever since then, I've been trying to understand how the Earth's climate depends upon what humans are doing. And what we've reached a point where humans are now, unfortunately, in charge, because we're changing the atmosphere much more than the natural variations that occur. So, and it's hard for people to understand this because you don't see that much happening. If you're as old as I am, then you can see that there have been that the planet is getting warmer more frequently. We get warmer than normal seasons. We're getting stronger storms and more fires the way have been observed in Australia and Greece and the United States and Moscow last summer. So things are starting to happen, but it takes time for the climate to respond to the thing. So there's more in the pipeline.
And that's one of the problems, really, isn't it? It's not something that's happening straight away. You can say, oh, Granddad says the weather was different, but you go, oh, I don't really know. And also in that time factor as well, with all these little changes happening, and it's something we could maybe just go on to now, the time to get things changed doesn't really fit a 3 or a 4 year political schedule. You know, because you've got to say, we've got to make these changes, we've got to put in these various bits and pieces, but a politician's not going to want to do that because in 2.5 years' time they're going to be re-elected. And no one really wants to hear that they've got to have a tax on this or a tax on that. Is that part of the problem as well?
Well, yeah. The problem is that these are changes that occur over decades, and politicians think about the next few years. And I really feel privileged to hear the things that I've heard in the last couple hours here, because it's really an issue of the people who understand the nature. We saw beautiful nature, and that's really what we want to be able to keep, so that young people will be able to have the same and witness the same beautiful things that we saw there. But the problem is that we're initiating changes that are going to become large during the lifetimes of the young people today. And if we're going to avoid those changes, it's clear that we can't burn all of the fossil fuels. It does not make sense to go after the last bits of oil in the deep ocean or the coal, because the coal is the biggest cause of changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide. It's clear we cannot dig up and burn all that coal. So going after the lignite in New Zealand just doesn't make any sense.
We're really just doing that because it's cheap, isn't it? It's cheap to go and dig a hole. Because it doesn't take into account any of the costs downstream from that.
It's cheap. And a few people will pad their wallets and will get rich, but everybody else will pay the penalty.
And you've described, and speaking of this, we can sit here and discuss this, and it's been in the media a lot in the last sort of week or so since you've been here. And I was interested, and people probably refer to this a lot, you once called coal trains death trains, and you were castigated very strongly for this. But do you think without that kind of hyperbole, no one pays you any attention?
Well, it's not hyperbole. It's the fact is that we are putting pressure on many different species on the planet, and the climate zones are shifting. A given temperature line, on average, temperature fluctuates from year to year, but if you average over a year, we see that a given temperature line is moving poleward at a rate between 50 and 100 kilometers per decade. That means 5 to 10 kilometers per year. And humans can turn on the air conditioning or turn up the heat, but animals can't do that. The other species can only live within certain climatic zones. So if those zones are shifting, then they have to move to stay within their zone. And some of them can't move that fast, 5 or 10 kilometers per year. So we're driving some of them to extinction. And if this continues for several decades, we're going to drive a significant fraction of species to extinction. There are about 2 million species living on this planet with us. But there's a danger that we can drive 20 to 40% of them to extinction this century if we stay on business as usual. And that's what we can't allow to happen.
That's right. And of course, if they could turn on the air conditioning, then that would only exacerbate the problem, because you'd need more power to run the air conditioning. That would drive them further and further away. So the question, I guess, that many people have sitting out here is what can we do? I mean, you've taken direct action against coal trains and things yourself, against mountaintop mining. You've been arrested for doing so. So does that kind of action make a difference, do you think?
Well, it's like civil rights in prior decades. The minorities did not get their rights in our country until people began to stand up and demand that. And some of them got arrested and get enough attention. And when the governments finally realized that the people are not going to stand for this any longer, then finally the changes occurred. And it's the same way here. It's great. This is great to see so many people came out in New Zealand to some of these talks the last week. because that's what's going to happen. We're going to have to get more people because the government won't respond, because as long as people are making money from the fossil fuels and in effect bribing the government, then the people's best interests are not going to be looked after, and we're going to have to stand up and demand that they are.
And as you've travelled around New Zealand, you've had packed houses around the place. How's the reaction been? Has there been a sort of mostly people who believe in climate change? Has there been a few skeptics out there? Has there been, members of the coal industry or the farming lobbyists? What have they had to say?
It's actually, I've been very encouraged because, yeah, of course, there are a lot of people who come out who are the people who do understand this, and we have to reach much bigger number than that. But I was encouraged in places like Gore, where the regular people came out, farmers, and they were not hostile, and many of them were very interested in this. And I think that that's encouraging. But we have to send a message to the politicians and get everybody to understand that we're all in this boat together. You can make a small amount of money by digging up the coal, but the consequences are going to be borne by everybody, and especially young people. This is really a question of intergenerational equity, because if we older people burn all the fossil fuels, we may get some benefit out of that, but then we're leaving a situation for young people. We're going to have to move on to other kinds of energy anyhow. So why not do it sooner, leave the rest of that stuff in the ground, and let's have a cleaner, healthier planet.
It's certainly one of the big issues that we've had in New Zealand, to talk of particularly renewable energy, whether it's hydro or wind. You have some very interesting thoughts on that, particularly in relation to us, where nuclear free have been for some period of time. You're an advocate of third and fourth generation nuclear energy. Believe with the renewables, even the likes of Germany, which use a vast amount. It's only 7%, I think, of their actual power. So with the renewables, what would you say to somewhere like New Zealand? What should we be doing?
Well, you're really lucky. I mean, this nation is blessed with enormous potential in renewable energies. Hydropower, wind power, geothermal, tidal power. There's
all of which have been sort of gone through environment courts, and a large number of people have all said, we don't want our river dammed, we don't want our view sort of impacted with wind turbines, we don't want tidal generators. Is it time perhaps for people to have a serious discussion about whether or not that's what we actually want?
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be a discussion, and I should point out that the cleanest kind of energy is energy efficiency. We're wasting a lot of energy. Not as bad in this country as in my country, but still there's tremendous potential for doing things more efficiently. But yeah, you have to choose. There's no form of energy that comes without some cost, and so you've got to decide. You've got to make choices. But you are blessed with a lot of good choices.
In terms of the nuclear thing, would you ever suggest to somewhere like here that maybe that's an option? I know obviously it's been sort of tarnished somewhat by the disaster in Japan, but it's moving on, isn't it?
Well, I don't think New Zealand needs nuclear power given all your other options, but I think that countries like China and India have a choice now between fossil fuels and nuclear power for their baseload electric power, and they've clearly made the decision that on the timescale of the next several decades they're going to be trying to phase out those fossil fuels and move to nuclear power for electricity. And if they're going to do that, then they need to do it with a technology which is as safe as possible and which is resistant to the possibility of somebody getting material they could use for weapons.